Happy Sunday, everyone. This is Beth Guide with Talking Purple, and it's been another busy week between primaries here in Texas, Supreme Court, tariffs, and a massive snowstorm in New Jersey. Um, there's a lot to go over and a lot to talk about, and I've got my notes. Oh, and ice. And I mean ice as in ice agents, not ice as in snow in New Jersey. So I guess the thing is, where do I want to start? I'm going to start with Mandami because I think he's going to be a fun person. I'm glad I don't live there anymore, and I'm glad I'm not subject to the situations by this. But I was tickled that he asked people to come out and help him with a snow shovel. But you needed two forms of ID to come out and ask people to come out and help. You don't need two forms of ID to vote, but you do need two forms of ID to shovel snow. Um, it's kind of funny about how that works out and when we want to utilize IDs and ID laws and when we don't. We continue to fight having forms of ID at a ballot box. I think it's because we're trying to allow people that do not have the right to vote. And I've made no bones about it. I'm a naturalized citizen. I love this country, and I value my right to vote. We went out of our way to make sure that I had that. I used to tell my mother the only job I couldn't have in America was to be president of the United States. It's been a long running thing. Not that I would probably want to be president, but that's the only job I can't have. But that's because I went about it properly and I went about it right. Um, it's funny. Elizabeth Warren is very interesting to me because she made a video about Trump and Trump policies and so on and so forth. The problem is, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over again, they don't want to solve the immigration problem. They want to talk about defunding ICE, defunding Homeland Security, which doesn't make us safer. Um, American safety is not apparently a priority. Uh, I saw this morning that some of the TSA checkpoints were going to be shut down. So if you went and paid your money to have a TSA card, apparently now TSA is shut down. So some people were saying they were still getting through with no problem. Uh, but I don't see how this makes our population safer. Um, we would rather change the law about law enforcement rather than change the law and legalize people and have the honest debate about what do we do with the non-criminal element in this country. Um, I keep saying that you come. I'm going to say this a little differently. I have a friend that told me that he thinks that it should be a work visa program with a 5-year revisit on each one of them. It doesn't. He said that the Hispanics don't actually want to be part of the country. They just want to have a job. Um, and if that's the case, that's okay. I mean, I wouldn't, but then we need to come up with a provision for them that they can go home and come back and do whatever they need to do. I don't know that I necessarily have a problem with hardworking people that want to come and do a job. Um, but I don't want them to have the right to vote because at the end of the day, it's culture changing because they're not wanting to be here to um, make America and be part of the fabric of America. And I think that's where some of the disinformation comes from because I think we take our own viewpoint and we foist it upon, a situation. So they figure, well, people came here, the country was built on immigrants, and these people want to come here. And it's an arrogance to me to start to want to think about things that way. Um, so I think Congress doesn't want to solve a problem. I think they're bound to need to solve the problem. That's their job. And I think they're changing and making laws that only exacerbate a problem. They're not fixing the root cause. They're addressing something well, we shouldn't have law enforcement. Okay, we have to have law enforcement. There has to be laws because there's public safety issues And if we don't want law enforcement, I mean, where are we on the safety of children? And I mean, I guess I could be funny and make a comment that, if you're not safe in the womb, then why should I assume that you're safe in your school? And I can see here the other side say, well, school shootings, and we're only worried about it when it's that circumstance. We're not worried about that kid coming home from school and getting, raped on their way home from school by somebody that shouldn't be here in the country. Um, if I was a criminal, which I'm not, but if I was a criminal, I would be really disappointed in this country because illegal aliens have more rights than the criminals at this point. I think that we need a whole support the criminal situation or something because they're the most forgotten class of people right now. Um, it's only, um, that's only what it is. So, with all of that said, um, I I really think the immigration debate in this country is skewed right now. I think it's because the left is owning the apparatus. I had made some comments about immigration before. Um, and when I say the comments in the scroll were very much positive law enforcement, that's left and right. I don't believe that your average run-of-the-mill Democrat wants to have laws not enforced. I don't think they want to have, I think everybody understands we need voter ID in this country. There's 80% of the people in favor of that. We need to make sure that people that come here are not killing people. I think everybody's in favor of that. And I think that we should be holding our elected officials accountable. That it's not just about, well, let's not enforce the laws that are here. Let's change the laws that are here. Fix the root problem. And I'm going to keep challenging them and saying they don't want to fix the root problem. They do not want to fix the immigration problem. Um, they want to cause the optical problem of law enforcement and go after the law enforcement entities. And I think that's a really big problem. Um, and I think we really need to look at that. Um, the next thing I want to talk about, because I'm really kind of intrigued by all of this, and I'm going to say that. Um, I want to talk about equal rights, excuse me, equal time on television and what that looks like and what that is. Some of you may have heard that, James Tallarico was supposed to be on the TV. They took him off the TV. They didn't let him on Colbert. He's saying it's Trump that stopped it. I actually think it was Crockett's campaign that said, "Hey, wait, if you're going to have him, you need to have us." Um, I don't think this was a Trump thing at all. Um, and I kind of understand it. I mean, you on some level, but then again, on a different level. Um, it's an old antiquated system that was back from when we had, three TV networks and two AM radio stations, and that was it. That you couldn't let people get on the TV and, just say something without offsetting it. So I do think there's some manner of value there, but we need to make sure that we're addressing things in an equal way. But Tallarico was interesting because he said a few things that, caught my attention and caught my ear. Um, and I have a young friend that's 21 years old, and he is struggling with, is he a Republican? Is he a Democrat? And he's supporting Democrat talking points. And, it goes to show you that when you listen to something, that if you don't have really good skills to discern what you're actually being told, um, that you can run into trouble. And I see that very much and very prominently here in this discussion that we're having with him ongoing. Um, but I will say Tallarico is very interesting, and this is kind of why. Because he brought up some points that I think have a lot of validity. Um, one of which was hypocrisy. And he said that he feels like the conservatives should stand up and support their principles regardless of who's in office. And I can't say he's wrong on that. You can't have principles and decide you want to do something only on the days that the other guy is in office. Um, and it's standing up for what you believe in and who you are and the things that, that you think. I have a few other examples of that. You should always stand up for the things that you vote for, and you should have an explanation. And you shouldn't always just vote no because you say that's the more conservative way to vote. Because at the end of the day, you're there to represent people and you're there to do what's in the best interest of the public. And we have this whole problem here in CD2, here in Houston, because Dan Crenshaw's running and he's got a person that is running from Montgomery County. And the problem is that they keep wanting the Montgomery County people want to just keep touting themselves as the most conservative. But what does that exactly mean? And what does that mean to, what does that mean to an average person? There's a lot of, and this goes for all of these primary situations that I'm seeing, a lot of calling people rhinos and calling people names and running against people rather than standing up and saying what you believe in. And I think that, I like to think that when or if I ever run for office, and I think it's probably going to be when, I always know what I'm standing up for and what I believe for. I've always been a person that has principle in that way. And if I have a position on something and I know about something, I can stand up and say why I think that, and I can argue both sides of that. I understand both sides of the argument for and against. I get it. I understand why it's that way. And what I see at the moment is I'm running for office and I'm more conservative. That's the reason. It says who on what. And then I want to talk about what is the responsibility that goes along with that? Because it's not just one person doing it. Um, I have one person that's running for office that he wants to say he's the most conservative person that runs for office, yet he voted to support Colony Ridge and he voted to impeach Ken Paxton and did that along with the Democrats. And that makes you more conservative. Why? So that's a red flag. Stand up for your votes. If you want to vote for something, stand up for them. Um, I still maintain that the person running out of Montgomery County, running in CD2, he's got all these people running around saying, oh, he is for flood. He voted for flood. And they point to a 2019 bill that he voted for flood relief efforts in the flood fund. And if you actually understood that, you would understand it has no impact on our neighborhood. And that's what they're holding up. And they want to show these two no votes. They just don't want to talk about them. They want them deleted. Um, they don't want to talk about the fact that when it came down to voting for or against the people in the same district that you wanted to represent, you actually voted against those people. Every person involved in this advised that the right thing to do was to set up this dredging district, that it was self-funding, that it would help protect it, that the instrument of taxation, it was there if it needed to, and it would be about a 6 cent tax per month on the 6 million people that are affected by this lake. And it was a city of Houston issue. Um, so all the reasons for voting against it are not valid. Um, and instead of owning that, I think it was not read, to be honest with you. They just want to act and erase it. And to me, it's patently dishonest to try to erase your voting record because it doesn't fit a narrative in a community that you need their vote. To me, I would have shown some forethought and said, I want to represent these people. Maybe just this one time I need to vote for them. But didn't do that. And it's easier to try to erase that vote. And flooding is on the ballot here in Kingwood. I promise you. And we keep talking about Harvey. and Hurricane Harvey as if that was the only flooding issue. But Kingwood has multiple flooding issues and multiple fail points, most of which are man made by development corporations out of Montgomery County. And those development companies are big donors. And as a result, nobody wants to tangle with them. I have a big problem with that too. I mean, I'd rather take $5 from a pile of people than take a large check from a development company that's then going to tell me what I can and can't vote for. So I think you shouldn't lie about your votes or try to obscure your votes or try to do a head fake and redirect and have rabid people say, see, he did vote in 2019. He voted for flood relief. See, you were wrong. Okay, back in 2019, you voted for a statewide fund that's underfunded, and I don't even want to get in the weeds in that. But 9 months ago, you voted against the community that you wanted to represent, and there's no getting away from that. There is no misrepresentation of that vote. You voted no. If you want to explain it and have a debate about it, explain it and have a debate about it. But you know what? I'm going to say for my community and the 3,000 people that I care about that are my why, that necessarily is not the big thing. We have a whole piece of property that needs attention. We have 3,000 people still sitting in a problem, and every time I try to go address it, I'm not allowed to. And that tells me something too. So we can all throw stones and say, I don't know what I'm talking about, or Bob Rehak or whoever doesn't know what they're talking about, and that we're all dishonest. But at the end of the day, all I can do is say, did they vote yes? Did they vote no? Is there explanation for yes, right? Will you take a meeting to sit down and talk to me? No. Um, Brett Ligon was very much happy to do that when he came in. And we were very much very worried about him as well. And he's done a fantastic job. So we can keep being rabid dogs and beating up and coming after people, or we can hear what people are saying. My concern is, as a representative, there's a great disconnect if you don't want to listen to what your constituents are saying, or you only want to listen to the constituents that agree with you. And I have a problem with that, and it's that problem's not going to go away. So calling the people that live in this town liars is not the right way to go about things. It doesn't make your point. And to try to say that it's not happening when it did, I think an honest person would say, yes, this is why I did this. This is why I did this. I didn't talk to Charles. I did talk to Charles, who is our representative, to understand what was on that, because I don't even know if he did speak to him before he voted against it. The other thing is that running an office that says, I'm not the other guy, I have a problem with that too. Um, so we've got a few issues here. Say what you believe in, say what you stand up for. Explain to people why you should earn their vote, not just be rabid dogs yelling and screaming, no, you're lying. No, I'm not lying. I'm reading it. Here's the bill, 1532, you voted no. Period. I don't care about bills in 2019 that predated all of this problem, predated the building that's gone on, and predated everything. You knew you were running for Congress. You knew you were running to represent these people, and you flat out, right before you declared, voted against it. Own it and explain it. Don't attack people or try to obfuscate or redirect, because that shows you have something to hide. Um, I don't roll that way. So, and my why is my 3,000 homes that I represent, and that I promised them I was going to do everything to make sure that they don't flood again. And so far it's held. Um, so there's a lot of that going on. Um, I also want to talk about Republicans in general because there's another whole problem that I see going on here. Um, when you have a primary situation, attacking the primary opponent and then saying we're going to all come together, kumbaya afterwards, after you've personally gone after people, is not a winning strategy. And I think we have to ask ourselves, and this is more about the Harris County judge race than it is anything else, as this comes out of my head. You have to ask yourself who can beat the Democrat opponent, all right? And who makes the most amount of sense. And we had to do that in the mayor's race. Um, and actually, the Republicans had to get behind John Whitmire to avoid Sheila Jackson Lee. And I'm going to tell you something, John Whitmire has been probably the best mayor we've had in many, many, many years. I give him a lot of credit for that. Um, but that's because we came together and for a common what is the best, what is the best direction for things? Okay. And we're now going to have, I think we're going to end up with a runoff in our county judge elections. And I think you have to look at who is going to be the person that can beat the Democrat because we have to have common sense moving forward. Now, um, I do hope that if we end up with a Democrat, that they remove some of this diversity, equity, and inclusion language around flood control. I was telling my friend this morning that I have no problem fixing some of the issues within my own neighborhood because our community has some of the emergency funds and money to do it. The problem is that the government will not allow us to do it. And if the government is going to step in and tell us what we can and can't do on things, then our elected officials have to have common sense voting strategies and understand that they just can't vote no on everything. Um, I think that with the Harris County judge election, you have to pick the person, not the best person that's running in the primary. You have to pick the person that's more apt to be able to win the general election because that's what you're ultimately running for, is who's going to win the general election. I am going to say that on the Republican side, there's only one person, in my opinion, that can beat um, the Democrat under any circumstances, and it's because they have a broad appeal and they can bring out the Hispanic vote. Uh, Marshaling firemen is probably not going to be enough to win an election. I mean, I know everybody likes firemen, they look good in a calendar, um, but they're not going to win against a reasonable, sensible, center left Democrat that has a long history in this city, other than they were okay up until they voted to let men into women's bathrooms. Um, so And the other side of that coin is that the other person running on the Democrat side, one of our candidates, actually endorsed them, and there's a video. I think that video is going to be up one side and down the other. And there's other people that are running that the Republican guy endorsed as well or made videos with, like Adrian Garcia. It would be nice to get Commissioner's Court back to red. Um, Mostly because it's one of the more important roles. So we would have a Republican county judge and commissioner's court and a Democrat mayor and city hall. And I think that you end up with some manner of a balance of power here in the city of Houston. So everybody wins. Now, Tuesday night, I'm supposed to go down, and I'm a little bit conflicted because I have some stuff with the Humble um, school board that I'm supposed to be doing that I made a commitment to do, and I don't think I can alter. But on Tuesday night, they're having a special session on whether ICE should be allowed in the city and whether ICE should be allowed to, do we support law enforcement or do we not support law enforcement? And we had Jocelyn Nungari was murdered in this city by an illegal alien. We have one of the poster people for this whole problem that was right here in Houston. Um, I don't think anybody in the city of Houston wants children being murdered. I don't think and I think as long as we're going after the criminal element, I think we need to go after the criminal element because it's vast, it's wide. As a woman, I have to be very careful of where I go. I have to make sure I'm armed because if I'm not, I have a serious problem because I find myself, I can't stop and get gas. I can't, I don't even know if I would not go walking on my green belts at this point without a gun. Because at the end of the day, the criminal element is there and it is infiltrated the entire, there seems to be no safe place to hide from it all. Um, and it's funny to me because the people that advocate this live in houses with walls around them. They live in gated communities. They can afford private security. They don't have people breaking into their house when they go to work. They don't have the same problems the rest of us do. And I think that's something that is overlooked that us normal slums, we get up in the morning, we go to work, we leave our houses unguarded. Um, we, we go for a walk, we might walk our dog. Many of us, I don't have a big dog anymore. I got a little tiny dog. Um, what is our safety worth? I mean, I guess nobody's going to come after me because I'm, middle aged now and but what about our kids? And what about our younger folks? And what about our 20 and 30 something year olds? I mean, there is a definite cultural difference here of a problem, and it needs to be addressed. And the city of Houston needs to back up its police. It needs to not take a stand on ICE and make us be the next Minnesota or, and I shouldn't say Minnesota, I mean Minneapolis. I mean a city, not a. So I'm not going to get to go down and speak. I wish I could. Um, because I am a naturalized citizen. I do value my citizenship and I know what it's like to come here. And as lawmakers, instead of subverting the law, we should be supporting the law and working to change the law. All right. If you want the people to stay, the law changes that need to be made are to come up with a legalization mechanism for these people. It is not to subvert the law the way it's written and cause problems. At least that's my opinion. Um, we should be calling our congressmen, we should be calling our senators, and even calling the White House and saying, hey, legislate, stop talking about it and legislate a solution. And that's a big part of this. Um, Jumping around a little bit, I want to go and talk about the tariffs here a second, and then I want to go back to what is the definition of a conservative. The situation with the tariffs, I kind of I kind of looked at all of this, and this is not a constitutional question, just so we understand. This is a statutory question. Congress gave the president the right to levy taxes in certain cases. And Trump took the path of least resistance and did most of his two-thirds of his taxes were done under this emergency law because it was the path of least resistance. And while I agree with Kavanaugh, I think Gorsuch, and I actually always look to him because frankly, I'm going to say he is the most, he understands the Constitution the best, for lack of a better way to say it. And I think when history looks back on it, he's going to be in the vein of Anton Scalia. And what he said is he voted against doing this because he's worried that in the future, other presidents would utilize this. I don't like gasoline powered cars, so we'll put a tax on that. I don't like, I have environmental concerns, so it becomes a slippery slope. And I think that the Trump tariffs can be handled in a different way. It just makes it more difficult to move forward. It is going to force a refund probably on some of them to some of the people that had to pay them. So I wish they had not made it. I don't know if you can do this because I'm not a lawyer, but I would have said don't make it retroactive, that it goes backwards, that starting today and going forward is how I would have handled it. Barrett and the three more liberal leaning justices, they just were like, just because, and they did that. These tariffs have stopped wars between India and Pakistan because they give the president leverage. They have stopped fentanyl, which is killing our population. And it really was not a pro American ruling. It sort of weakened the office of the president. And the reasons this was all brought up is because everybody wants to weaken Donald Trump, not understanding that there's long terms. This should have just been left alone. We now have it on the books what can be, can't done. I mean, Gorsuch used it a way to limit future presidents, but not all minutes in history are the same, and not all ways to do this. One thing that the people that are talking about this did say is Congress has the ability to change the law. But in our current climate, Congress is sort of denutted, for lack of a better way to say it. It's ineffective. It doesn't listen. It's not here to bring solutions for the American people. And it's why Congress has a, 3% approval rating. I mean, in a country that nobody can agree on anything, everybody thinks Congress sucks. And I think that doing the best for the public at any given point in time is lost in the wayside. This getting along and compromising, and I'm going to go back to Crenshaw for a minute. One of the flyers I got said, "See, he voted with AOC. He voted for AOC in support of vets with PTSD because the VA needs to do a better job of supporting vets with PTSD." And if we can get consensus and everybody can vote together because they think our vets need help, then so be it. But instead, we're so dysfunctional and nobody's making decisions based on what's the best interest for the people. And they're putting party over practicality. And, I grew up a Rush baby. And I can't even say I'm a Rush baby because I didn't come across him until I was in my 20s. My very early 20s, but in my 20s nonetheless. But I already knew that I was a constitutional person, that if it wasn't in the Constitution, it was relegated back to the states. And that's a good way to do things. That's a good definition of conservatism. We shouldn't be spending, the federal government, we shouldn't be paying the federal government for them to apportion our money back to us. Um, there's a whole bunch of things like that. So when I say what are a conservative, you ask me, it's somebody that believes in the Constitution as written, not as a living, breathing document. It's somebody that understands that the government should be limited in its role in our lives. That doesn't mean that we use it to legislate religion or religion aspects, for or against. If the state wants to put the Ten Commandments on the wall, it's not the federal government's place to come in and take it down. We were talking about gay marriage, and that is a constitutional issue. And the reason it's constitutional issue is because a license is issued and it goes against over state interstate commerce just like your driver's license. And it's why your driver's license is recognized in multiple states because there is the interstate commerce clause, because there's certain functions that we have to do. Here in Texas, it's conservative to be against gay marriage. But the reality is, it's a religious principle as to why you're against it. The second gay marriage became a way to confer rights between people and became contractual, the religious aspect of that sort of became distant, if you will. And if you had to adjudicate contractually what you needed to do. The second California approved it and people could leave California with that license and those rights were in place, whether it be health insurance, medical power of attorney, the list is property rights, divorce, it had to become a 50 state policy. Now, not to turn this all into a gay marriage speech, but it's the prime example of the difference between why abortion can be state by state. It's because those that is should be adjudicated on a state level. Because if I want an abortion, I can get in my car and drive to a different state, and that's fine, but there's no rights and no financial benefit or gain to that being able to happen. I'm not pro-abortion, so I don't want anybody to run the wrong way with that. I'm speaking this on a clearly legal basis. We are a center right country. Okay. Most people want to get up in the morning, they want to go to work, they want their kids to go to school and not be indoctrinated, they want them to learn to read, and they don't really want them necessarily being forced or having discussions about sex or how to have sex. Or if I do that with an adult, I am ostracized and I'm saying I'm harassing them. If I do it with a child, I'm a hero. We shouldn't be having sex discussions in school with children, period, end of story. Okay. I think most parents agree with that. We want to go to church on Sunday, or we want to go to Little League on Sunday. We want to go hang out with our friends. And we really don't want government intrusion into our life on a regular basis. Do we understand not to drink and drive? Yeah, we understand that because it's a public safety hazard. So we need law enforcement and we need government to be able to put some of those things in place, guardrails in place, so we don't run amok and aren't killing each other. There's a time and a place for everything. And I think that's where this is. So to say you're a conservative or somebody's a rhino, or the problem is the Republicans are eating their own. The Democrats don't do that. They don't have these personal battles and on the radio slamming one side and slamming the other side. And we don't have any of that going on. And it's because they understand that they need to have a united front and a united narrative. The guy, what's his name? Fetterman. He is a little bit more centrist of a Democrat. And although they don't agree with him on a lot of things, you don't see him out being attacked on a regular basis, at least not on the left. They may go primary him, but there's not a big discussion about it. They understand how to play this game. And if I come back to Tallarico, he sort of understands it too, I think. Overall, this country is in the middle. And I like to say 80% of us are in the middle and 20% on the edges, which I understand adds up to 120%. So as I say that, I'm kind of being funny about it. Um, but 80% of the country is pretty much in the same place. They want to go to work, they want to go to school, they like the police, they feel good when the police come and ride around their neighborhood. They don't want illegal criminals running around threatening their children. They want to let their kids go up to the school and play on the swing set and not have to worry about them being kidnapped. They want to send their kids to a school to get an education. And there is extremists on both sides of this. And I think we need to understand that neither side is exempt from that. It's just that the left knows how to engage theirs better. They know how to utilize them better. They know how to put them and get them out on the vote on to get the vote better. And they know how to keep them in. They're not a big tent party anymore because I think that the wackos on the very far edges alienate so many people. I think that when I say you don't want boys and girls sports, I think that 75% of the country understands that. Okay. They may like their Tesla, but they understand that boys should not be playing in girls' sports and that it only hurts women's rights issues when that happens. So we can be anti or embrace climate change or anti fossil fuel, but we still understand that boys should not be in girls' sports. Um, I think if I asked most of them, although an abortion would not be for them, they don't think they should take that right away from somebody else. Does that, do they understand that there's people on the far left that are fighting and doing so in a manner that they're it's almost the original person, what's her name, Margaret Sanger, that was, she was for eugenics, and that a majority of the abortions are done in the black community and it's hurting the black community. I think if you walked into any liberal white neighborhood and asked that question, they would not believe that I'm telling the truth on that. And I think these are the kind of things that we need to look and we need to listen to. um I do have a really good friend that's a Democrat. And he said to me, he said, first of all, he said, I should I should tell you guys that I think Kristi Noem should not be the Department of Homeland Security Secretary anymore. And I hadn't really given much thought about it. Um, because I think the job of that is a figurehead. I don't know that I think that she's on. I think Holman is more of the secretary than Kristi Noem is at this point. But what do I know? I mean, so as we're yelling and screaming about Kristi Noem, I don't know what I think. I liked her originally, and I thought, but here I do see some of it that it looks like our hair and makeup tends to be a little bit more done than what it should be. But I thought it was funny that he said, well, if you say Kristi Noem should be um, fired, that people were going to react to that. So I don't know that I think she should be fired. I kind of think I feel bad for her and Pam Bondi because I don't think either one of them are kind of doing their job well, but I don't quite know why I think that. I think some of the stuff that goes on, I think they're put in a really hard place and trying to defend something that they really, it's kind of like, what was that lady, Jean-Pierre, the Biden secretary? Oh, Biden's the healthiest person in America. I mean, we all knew that there was a problem. I mean, anybody that doesn't, I don't know what to tell you, but I mean, for the most part, everybody knew that there was a problem with Biden. So when she got out there and said he was the healthiest, everybody kind of laughed at her because they understand. And I feel like kind of Bondi and Nome have the same problem because they have to do the job that their boss says they have to do. So I can't judge them on their own. What I can say is for Bondi's case, she did an excellent job when she was in Florida. And I think that she probably was the right person for the job. But I do think that Trump needs to back her up a little bit more and not leave her with her butt hanging out so much. Um, I do think there's that. So that's all my thoughts for this Sunday. It's a pretty day. It's the first pretty Sunday that we've had in a while, and I think I'm grateful for that. If you're in Texas, early voting is one more week. Um, Make sure that you get out and you make your own decisions on things and don't just go with the commotion that you hear on the internet. Um, and don't believe everything you see because it's not true. Um, and when people are saying what the truth is and other people are arguing and subverting the truth, know the issue well enough. Either and I'm kind of disappointed in the people that are out there carrying the water. Um, because I thought some of them were very smart people, and I never would compromise what I think. And I hope that they can walk some of this back and they don't compromise themselves over this. And then some of them I think like they maybe went too far. So that's all I got for this Sunday. It's the first Sunday of Lent. So if you're Catholic, only, a few more weeks and then we're on to Easter. Um, take it as the journey it is. Go vote, and I'll talk to you all next week. And this is Beth Guide with Talking Purple. And, again, I want to making sense common again, because that's what I think we're lacking.